Rosie is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. She's a cheerful little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and 3 short stumpy domes. Since her inception, Rosie has been a fan favorite in the Thomas series, despite having been introduced in the hit era. And today, we're covering her entire story. We will learn about the history behind her design and conception, see all the major appearances she has in the show, and see how she embodies a little sister role in the show. And overall, see what makes Rosie, Rosie. Let's dive in. Rosie is based on the USA S100 class tank engine. Being built by several different locomotive works in America, they were immediately sent abroad to serve in Europe, Asia, and Africa in World War II. Most would continue to serve after the war, being purchased as army surplus. In Britain, they found themselves mostly doing shunting work. Most famously, several examples worked at Southampton docks. Their short wheelbase and high power made them ideal for the sharp corners of the docks. In 1962, the S100s were replaced by diesel shunters, mainly the Class 07s. While most engines were withdrawn and scrapped, 4 examples were preserved and are still with us today, those being 30064, 30065, 30070, and 30072. In addition, there are more than 100 examples worldwide. Rosie herself appears very similar to her basis, but a keen eye can also spot several changes. These include, but aren't limited to, her main coupling rods being attached to her center drive wheels, her funnel's taller, and her whistles in front of her cab. She also lacks this metal plate that goes below her smoke box and has these things under her tanks. These were presumably added to hide the motor in her models. She also appears taller and thinner than her basis. Rosie would later receive a completely new look, but we'll touch more on that later. Rosie was originally marketed as an engine for little girls to relate to. Her original pink paint and blush made it quite obvious. In a way, she was meant to be a toy that would allow siblings to play together. While little boys would use characters like Thomas, James, or Oliver, my boy, their sisters could use girls like Rosie, Molly, and Emily. This would allow siblings to more easily bond over a common interest. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Rosie's basis and design. Now let's take a look into her character and history. Rosie has been described as being a tomboy, but I can't really see it. A tomboy usually refers to a girl who displays masculine traits. Often in fiction, a tomboy is someone who avoids feminine interests or is depicted as edgy. This description does not fit Rosie at all. If she was a tomboy, she would probably keep trying to prove that she's just as good, if not better than the boys, and wouldn't sport her bright pink paint. If anything, she's the complete opposite. Rosie made her big debut in Season 10's Thomas and the Birthday Mail. She was implied to be a new engine, but has been on Sodor for an unknown period of time. She is seen to strongly admire Thomas and strives to be just like him, which gets on his nerves. Rosie, like all hit era characters, exists to sell toys. Rather than aiming for another character to add to the boys' collection, Rosie was made for the little girls and sisters watching the show. She was a toy someone would hand their little sister if they asked to play trains. This also applies to Emily, Molly, and Lady of course, but Rosie is different. Her character also embodies the little sister role. Rosie sees Thomas and wants to be just like him, much like little girls with their brothers. Children, especially younger ones, are very impressionable. They're constantly learning and observing everything and everyone around them. They see the way their family and friends act and come to believe that's how they should act as well. This can lead to them wanting to be just like those around them, and they emulate their behavior as best they can.
She tried to wish the way he did. She even tried to whistle like Thomas. It made Thomas cross.
I myself am one of the middle children in my family, which allows me to see both sides of this relationship. When I was young, I always wanted to do what my older sisters did. I would want to play in their games, hear about their fandoms, and do what they did. When we all grew older and they moved out, I found myself as the one the little siblings looked to. And while I enjoyed them liking what I did, it did feel sometimes like they only liked it because I did. This dynamic between Thomas and Rosie is really well done and very realistic. I also love the fact they chose an S100 for Rosie's basis. The USA tanks were newer and younger than the existing E2s, yet they both worked in the same place and were like siblings. Also being built in America but going to other countries and adapting to how they run their railroads, much like Rosie does here. While she may just be another product for hit to market, the fact there was so much to design and character that lines up with Thomas is just incredible to me. Throughout the first episode, Thomas mainly tries to avoid Rosie and goes on a route he thinks she can't handle. This leads to him getting stuck in a landslide and gives him no choice but to accept her help. I feel that Rosie is one of the best concepts to come out of the hit era, even though I don't think she was meant to appear much more and would just fall off the edge with the other newbies. Especially when you take this line from the old and new song into account.
'Cause Rosie you don't see so much, so don't forget her name.
This was not to be, however, as Rosie returned to help Thomas and Hector the Horrid. But when Hector frightens her away, Thomas gets mad and finally stands up to him. This shows that Thomas is willing to get scared or be threatened, but he won't stand for someone bullying his friends. They could have used another engine for this role if they wanted. They could have used Percy, Bill, or Ben, but they chose Rosie. And I think this helps flesh out their established sibling-like relationship. We now see Thomas's protective side as he stands up to a bully to keep him from doing anything to her. And after this, Thomas no longer avoids her, and they have a healthier relationship. In season 12, Rosie finally got her first lead role. In this one, she tries to pull a carnival train by herself, but loses most of the trucks. Her intentions are good, however, as she tries to help Emily by doing some of her work. Again, this is a very realistic portrayal of little siblings in general. They can try to help you and have good intentions, but they can still mess up. When the show switched to fully CGI, Rosie was one of the 4 hit era characters to continue to appear. In season 13, we see another significant moment between her and Thomas. Thomas not only allowed, but asked her to pull Annie and Clarabelle. I literally can't think of another time he's even considered this. Most of the time a new character will take them without asking, and Thomas will get upset and hostile. Even when Percy first pulled them, we're clearly told that Thomas is worried, and as soon as he can, he runs right back to them and takes them for a run. Almost like this whole time he was on the main line, he was just paranoid about them, and Percy didn't gain his full trust to pull them until season 3, and that was because Thomas was too busy. One of Thomas's defining characteristics throughout all eras is his connection to Annie and Clarabelle. When someone thinks of Thomas, they always remember those 2 coaches falling behind. For Thomas to allow Rosie to pull them while he puts right his mistakes speaks volumes about their development. Rosie first proved herself when he underestimated her. She was excited to help him shunt Hector, before trying to show initiative and help another engine with their work. This level of trust they've built up over time is really great, and one of the few times this ever happens. Thomas can now trust Rosie, and Rosie has proven to be very reliable. At the end of the episode, Rosie suggests to Thomas that they continue to play their mud game, but Thomas has learned when to have fun and when to work.
I think I've done enough splish, splash, sploshing for one day.
For the rest of the CGI era, Rosie makes a few cameos and side roles, but nothing really to write home about. This was the norm for Rosie up until season 20, when she didn't appear at all. This had a reason, however, as she was having some significant changes done. She returned in season 21, now sporting a brand new look. Gone was her bright pink paint and blush, she now sported a burgundy red with white lining and a dash of yellow. She also carried a large headlamp in reference to her American origin, and the Northwestern initials on her tanks. Although Rosie actually started carrying her headlamp in season 18. She even got her own number, representing her status as a 37th standard gauge engine. The first time we saw Rosie in her new look was in Journey Beyond Sodor, but timeline-wise, her first appearance was in Hasty Hannah, followed by her next significant role in the fastest red engine on Sodor. This time around, she was paired up with James. When he discovers he's not the only red engine anymore, he asks to race her. I kinda like that her racing James kind of plays into a lead episode, where the narrator says she's quick.
She's very quick.
But their racing nearly leads to James crashing into Henry. Rosie notices his brakes make an abnormal sound and suggests he get himself checked over at the works. James tries to brush it off, but she puts her foot down and sends him off while she delivers his trucks. This new and more mature side of her character does really well with her new look. While she still enjoys having fun, she knows when to be serious and level-headed, especially considering the fact she saw Thomas learn this firsthand in season 13. Her new, more mature personality also ties in with the time passed since her introduction. Rosie has now been around for 11 years, and it's nice to see the writers take this into account and let her grow. Not only that, but little girls who watched Rosie and played with her toys as kids would now be in their early teen years. A bright, pink, girly engine probably wouldn't have appealed to them as well, but having her grow more mature and lose some of her girly traits can allow her fans to enjoy her all the more for it. I also like that they paired her up with James here, as he can show how a lot of teens or even young men act. He's cocky, arrogant, and loves to show off, which can lead to trouble. You ever wonder why so many teen guys end up in accidents and injuring themselves? It's because they always like to show off and prove themselves. Meanwhile, many girls, especially those who eventually become mothers, become more level-headed and mature. In this era of the show, it's quite rare to see characters progress and evolve, but engines like Daisy and Rosie show that it's possible. I just wish I could say the same for Thomas. In Rosie is Red, she is blamed for one of Diesel's misdeeds at the docks, until Thomas stands up for her. In order to get the last laugh, Diesel starts teasing him for liking Rosie. In turn for him sticking up for her, Rosie defends Thomas. But what does he do? He does a complete 180 on all their development and avoids her again. And when she tries to thank him for helping her, he spins right around and starts making fun of her.
Look at Rosie, everyone! She thinks something happened when it didn't. Silly Rosie.
Wow, Thomas, really? 1 minute you're sticking up for her, the next you put her down to avoid being teased yourself. This makes Rosie visually upset, and she feels betrayed. Her hurt leads her to being angry and avoiding him, and later venting to Edward, until the Fat Control asks them both to bring trains to Vickerstown. When they do meet up, they're able to talk it out and clear the air between them. This episode is meant to show kids that just because they are being teased for being friends, it doesn't mean they have to avoid each other. I like that this episode caps off Rosie's role in the show, and shows how much she's grown up. But at the same time, Thomas making fun of her to avoid looking silly was uncalled for. With the show's new policy on gender equality and the updated appearance, many fans believed that Rosie was going to get an even bigger role in the series. Unfortunately, this was not to be, as Mattel instead replaced fan-favorite characters with new girls, rather than using existing characters. For the rest of her appearances, she's seen mainly shunting at Vickerstown, where she's now officially allocated, and when Henry was moved out of Tidmouth, he joined her in her shed. And that was about it for Rosie. Overall, I'd say she got some of the most significant growth in the series. From an admiring little sister to a genuine friend, and finally a more mature character and a full redesign. She was initially made as an engine for little girls to like, and grew as a character for her fans to relate to as they grew older. This progression of maturity can mirror the kids growing up with her. As time goes on, those kids who are related to her can still find some common ground with her as the years go on. Similar to how the kids reading the Railway series would get older, but still relate to the characters' struggles as they grew up. And I think that that's what sets Rosie apart from not only the other female characters, but the other engines as a whole. And that's why Rosie will continue to be a fan favorite, and will always have a spot in the Thomas fandom. Thanks for watching everyone, I'll see you next time, and as always, stay really useful.